Welcome to episode 10, Mostly Lifting Stuff. Today we're joined by Noah Francis. Noah, welcome.
Thank you.
Noah's got some good background.
I got to ask Noah a few little questions here before we started, as usual. Noah graduated with a psych major and comm minor, currently in graduate school for clinical mental health counseling.
Yeah, tongue twister.
Yes, it is. Noah served 3 years in the Army and retired due to injury.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that the way to say it?
That's
Honorably discharged.
Oh yeah, it's honorable for sure.
And now, as a gym rat, he focuses on a little bit of powerlifting and bodybuilding. What did you call it earlier?
Power building.
Power building.
Power building, yeah.
He's a power builder now.
It's trendy.
Yeah, I kind of like it.
Gym rat though, yeah, definitely. That's.
I had to
for
throw
sure.
that in there.
Yeah.
It's a special anniversary, episode 10, so we had to mix up some words.
Big episode 10.
So Noah, how is your day going? How was the lift today? We saw you earlier. We both did.
Yeah, I saw
it
both
great?
at different times. You got a good pump, man. It was good.
Chest and shoulders.
Yeah, it was chest, shoulder, try. So it was on a push day today.
Okay. So we understand that you were in the Army. How did you get hurt? What happened?
All right. So shorter version of the short story, basically, is long story short. I broke my back and have like pretty severe like nerve damage in my lower back from it. That causes this thing called radiculopathy, which is like nerve damage down the bottom, down your legs, down your lower extremities, which causes like paralyzing pain. So that happened like a couple weeks prior to our like deployment date. So before you deploy, you go to this thing called JRTC. For those of you listening, I was in the infantry, so pretty much don't know what that is. As the dudes who like walk around with all those guns and like bound and shoot, and like your job is literally like to be the front on the front lines. So our mission for deployment was to do route clearance, which is you go out on the roads every day and you look for IEDs. So we're the security element for the engineers who would find the IEDs and try and disassemble them or clear the road. Hence the name route clearance. So when we would come across them, we would dismount as the infantrymen and we would do security elements, but also look for like trigger men. And if you found them, like our job was to eliminate the enemy. So these trucks are made like to be 8 feet in the air, 6 to 7, 8 feet in the air from like the bottom of them, because they're made to like withstand getting like hit with a bomb essentially. So we are dismounting. We're receiving contact in this simulation, right? Which is in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Everything's treated like you're actually in combat. You have like these lasers on, like these sensors on you and lasers on your weapons. It's like laser tag for grown men, and cost $1 billion, but never works. It sucks. But
You get a shock or anything? You get a zap when you get hit?
luckily, no. It just has. If you get hit, you have this loud ring noise, and you have like this thing in your pocket that they have to take out, and either it'll tell you like sucking chest wound or like shrapnel to the leg. So you have to like put a tourniquet on you. You have to assess the person like they actually got hit.
Okay.
Or else say KIA or something. But so we were at this point. I was acting as a team leader for this within my squad, and so I was pulling security for my guys to get down from the truck. It's like a big ladder. The door is like not like a regular car door, right? You don't just like open it up and just jump out. It's like you have to press a button because it's a hydraulic door, and it has like hundreds of pounds of like pressure behind it to withstand like the shock waves from blast. So everything they tell you, like the first thing they tell you when you get to these trucks, like do not be that guy that gets stuck in the door, because it will take your arm off, right? Like it will crush you. It won't stop. And they continue to tell like, don't be that guy. Guess what? I was that dude. Almost. But so I was pulling security for them as they got down. I let go of the button to get down, and then there's supposed to be another button at the bottom that someone else is pressing, but no one's pressing it, and I heard the sound of like the door closing behind me, and I was like, oh crap. It's like get stuck in this door and like tear my arm off or just jump. And full battle rattle is usually pretty heavy, so like all your gear and equipment. I was carrying like extra ammo too for our gunner, so I weighed quite a bit, probably well over 325 pounds, like with all my gear on. And then it took like this weird jump from like 7 feet, and like I landed on my feet, but I landed super weird. And I knew something was wrong, but like just trucked through. We probably had like a 5-click like walk in like pretty heavy terrain after that before we remounted. and I knew I like messed up my back, but I didn't know what I did. And it was like I could move around, and then like 20 hours later, I was literally just sitting on a cot. We're getting our op order from our like battalion commander, and I just got like this shooting pain throughout my whole body. Like I could barely breathe. Like I was taking like the smallest little breaths just to try and get air into my lungs, and I just had to do that for like 10 minutes because there's no way I was going to like interrupt a battalion commander giving an op order, right? Like I would be screwed at that point, and I didn't know what happened either. So as soon as he ended, like I screamed for like our doc to come over, and they had to like lay me down on the cot because like I could not move myself, and it was like this pain that like just shot from like head to toe. Like I could move my toes, but it would like cause like tremendous pain. So we were getting ready to go on like another 72-hour mission in like 8 hours. So everyone else like crashed, went to bed. I just laid there and just like this agonizing pain this whole time. Then they all get up to go on this mission. My sergeant comes over, the platoon sergeant. He's like, "Yo, Francis, like, get up. It's time to go." I'm like, "Sorry, I can't move." He's like, "What the hell you mean you can't move? Like, get up. We're going. You can't just like not move." And because this is being treated like we're actually in combat, it's not just like you can't just like go see a doctor, right? So he's like, "Well, we'll be back in 3 days." So like they put some MREs by my cot, some water, and they like deuced out, and I just laid there for 3 days, kind of just didn't move, didn't eat, like drank a little bit of water. And when they came back, I was still there. And at that point we knew like, okay, something's actually wrong with your back, dude. So I went and saw some medics, and they gave me some ibuprofen and said drink some water. And that was it for that time period. And so we were there for like 2 more weeks, and I was like, I could barely move around. And when we got back to Fort Campbell, I saw a doctor for the first time like 3 weeks after the initial injury happened. And by this time I was like walking around like Shrek, right? Like just like barely hobbling, like stiff back. And I was still trying to deploy, so I wasn't trying to like, screw that up. And so I was trying to like just like it'll be okay, right? Like I just threw my back out. So I kind of like played it lesser than it actually was to the doctors at first, hoping like it'll just kind of like go away. And then our deployment date got pushed back like another month or two. And at this point, like I was not able to like keep up with like platoon standards, like in the morning for PT and stuff like that. They were like, "Dude, like something's wrong. If you can't do this, you better get a profile for this. So like you can tell us that you're not supposed to do it." So a profile is like essentially a piece of paper you hold around, like someone comes up to you, who's like pissed off at you, is like, "Do push-ups," right? It can be like, "Sergeant, I'm on profile." I'm like, "Let me see your profile," and then they'll figure something else out for you to do because it's not conducive to your injury. But it took 5 months of pretty much from that point to 5 months later, where I got misdiagnosed the whole time. I got put in PT. They said it was like a muscle problem, and so I ended up getting worse and worse and worse. The pain ended up getting worse and worse and worse. And the doctors essentially like came to me and was like, "Dude, you're faking because the medicine's not working, the treatment plan is not working." And they went to like my command and was like, "Yeah, Francis is he's faking to get out of deployment," which was like the biggest hurt out of everything, right? Because that's like a shot to the character. That's like
right,
the shittiest thing someone can do. And so they finally said, "We're going to give him an MRI to prove that nothing's wrong so that we can kick him out." And so then it took like a month from that point to get that MRI. So like a month of just being treated like the worst human being ever to live in this already pretty aggressive environment. And then when I finally got the MRI done, I got this, I was told to like go see the doctor like the next morning, which is weird because I had like an appointment for like a week later. And I never got like an apology or anything like that. But he was like, I stepped in his office, he was like, "All right, so here's what happened." That was the first time I heard anything conducive to do with this injury, like 6 months after it happened. And he pretty much said like when I took that jump, my back was kind of like a spring or like a accordion, right? Like it like went, it can like, I don't know how to describe it perfectly, but it like put so much pressure on like 3 discs on my lower back. 3 of them like ended up rupturing. Like 20 hours later, they started like the trauma at first caused them to like bulge, and then 20 hours later they like ruptured, and my back was like sticking it's like squeezing a jelly donut essentially, right? So like the outside of it is kind of like a hard casing, but if you squeeze it, the jelly's gonna fly out. That was my back. So and then he described like the nerve damage and stuff like that from it.
How long did it take to recover after you knew what it was?
Still recovering, honestly. So at that point, there wasn't much we could do. We did like 3 outpatient procedures, and it really didn't help the pain all that much. And then they were like, all right, well, we can go and infuse your back. But at this point, I'm 20 years old, and they were like, if you do this, like, you're probably, like, we can't say guaranteed, but you're probably going to have the same surgery again. And the success rate for back surgeries, especially done by Army doctors, like, is not the highest of odds, right, of like recovering and being better than you were before. And at this point, this is over a year from the injury when we're at this point from when it happened. And I was literally just like pissed off. I was done with Army doctors. I was ready to move on with my life. Like I kind of during this time relearned how to walk, how to take showers, how to get out of the car without like aggravating my back and legs. So I seriously just wanted to get out of there and just like move on with my life. And so they gave me the option, all right, have this surgery now or go before the medical board and see if you can get a medical discharge. And the way they do that is you go through this process, they look at all your medical records, and they rate you. And if you're under a certain rating, you get medically discharged, and it's a little bit different. Still an honorable discharge, but you get like a one-time like payment or whatever, and you're separated from the Army. And if you get rated high enough, it's medical retirement, which different benefits kick in at that point because of the severity of your injury. And so I fell on that higher end because of the injury, and so that whole process took about another, from that point, like 8 months. So I spent probably like a little over a year and a half from the time like when I got hurt to when I got out. And so I got out, and at this point, I weighed like 250 pounds. And before the injury, I weighed about 200 pounds. Like I couldn't do any like physical exercise really. Before I got hurt, like I was never into nutrition before that. Like I was eating whatever I wanted, but in the gym was still making the gains, right? Like
right.
We had wing night like 3 nights a week, and the other nights were like freaking pizza or something like that.
Right. You were lifting, and you were very active, and you were kind of a sponge to whatever you're putting in was working because everything else was.
Yeah, like you're doing PT in the morning for an hour and a half, and then you get, as they would call it, like you get smoked throughout the whole day, right? Essentially, like when you're private or lower enlisted. And so you're doing physical activity from like 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., all the way to when you get off at 15:30 or 1700, anywhere between there, and sometimes even later. And then after that, you go to the gym and do lifting. So there's a lot of activity, so you can eat whatever you want. And then after I got hurt, right, like I kept that same diet.
Right. And
then plus like all these medications I was on. At one point, I remember I was reading like the list of like counter effects of the medications. 4 of them I was on. The main side effect was weight gain, while eating like crap, while not being able to do any exercise whatsoever, and like within a couple months, like I gained like probably like 30 pounds.
Just like a whole mix of like bad things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Wow.
And so when I got back, like I couldn't really do anything physically. I still wasn't like completely independent either on my like physical well-being. Like there were days where I'd still be like confined to my bed for days at a time. There'd be a lot of days, especially like in the winter time, where like I couldn't put my own shoes on. Like I was living with my parents at the time, and a lot of times my mom would have to like help me out, just like can go to school. And then from there, it's been like this long journey of like over the last like 4 years of getting back in the gym for like 2 weeks to a month, sometimes 2 months, and then re-aggravating something and be out for 6 months, and then doing that again, right, for 2 months, a month, right, and then being out for another 4 months. So it was kind of like this really aggravating and really frustrating cycle of trying to get back into shape, but also your body is limited so much. And that kind of, during that time frame, I got really into this thing called like positive psychology and like holistic health. And I noticed in hindsight, like the days I had the lowest amount of pain and the days that I slept the best were the days I like laughed the most, the days I had the most social interaction, the days where I like did things I enjoyed. was like, what the heck is this, right? And so I looked more into it, and this is when I started introducing like meditation into my life, and manipulating behaviors, introducing like positive, like holistic modalities, where it directly affected my level of pain. And when it directly affected the level of pain, it directly affected the limitations that I currently had. It kind of like raised the level that I could do. So I slowly, very slowly, like got back into the gym, very slowly like started eating right, and these access levels started to rise very slowly, and so did my progression of my back. And then it got to a point like about last February is when I was like, okay, I'm at this level where I can like go to the gym 3 to 4 days a week. And that's kind of where it started. And I was like, I'm really going to start like focusing on this because this is super important, because I was at the time researching like the interaction between the mind and body, like my degrees in psychology, right? So I was focusing on psychoneuroimmunology, which is kind of a big word when you first hear it.
Yeah.
But pretty much broken out psychoneuroimmunology. So like psyche, the self, identity, neuro, the brain, immunology, like the body, right? And the interactions between all of them, and how they, how a healthy mind helps produce a healthy body, and vice versa, and how those two interactions help produce a healthier concept of the self and identity and purpose. And so I was studying this. I was like seeing all these studies that showed like exercise, right? Like what that does for your mental health, and eating right, what that does for mental health. I was like, shoot, like if I'm reading this, I'm seeing these stats and this empirical data, why am I not doing this in my own life, right? Like, why am I not setting myself up for success? Why am I not trying? And I know the keys to like perform better and be able to raise my levels of optimum functioning. I'd be a fool not to start using those modalities. So I started doing those as well as like working out, and slowly 3 to 4 days turned 4 to 5 days, and slowly turned 5 and 6 days, and I wasn't overdoing it, right? It's like just starting out with 5 to 6 days every week, and just overloading my back and it being a shock to my body. It's like slowly a gradual strength increase, and as those increased, my limitations decreased, and so now I'm at a point where I feel healthier than I ever felt before. Like before the injury, I feel stronger than I did before the injury, and I think they all have direct effects of intentional behaviors, using those kind of like modalities on a day-to-day basis.
Do you think if you'd have been properly diagnosed from the beginning, like what kind of effect do you think that would have had on the recovery time, or do you think it still would have been kind of a long drawn out thing?
That's a good question. I think it probably still would have been a drawn out thing, because at the end of the day, like even if they would have diagnosed it on day one, right, I still would have had to gone through a time frame of like trying different treatment plans, and everyone's back injury is different, right? You can have like a barely herniated disc, and you could have more pain than somebody who completely like ruptured 5 discs in their back. It just depends on what happened and what nerve endings that they're like pinching or damaging in your back. So for me, they would still have to take that kind of like pretty long process of assessing my back and assessing my individual experiences, and then eventually like it still would have been surgery. And at the end of the day, like I remember I was 20 years old, and I got a diagnosis from this doctor. He said, listen, like you're not going to be able to, in 5 years, say you have a kid, you're not going to be able to pick them up. Like this isn't like, you're probably not, like you're not going to be able to like play with your kid. Like that's the new normal of pain, right? You're always going to live with this. We can kind of sustain it, but we can't make it better. And we can try to make it a little better with surgery, but even that, we don't know. So that was kind of like the big conversation in my head of like, I wasn't like lose all hope, but I never expected to be able to be back in the gym ever again. Like I never expected to be able to be squatting or deadlifting or bench press. Like that was out the window. Like 4 years ago, like completely out the window, because it wasn't accessible. It wasn't a reality. And I was like, okay, so this is the new normal. Cool. Sucks, but what am I gonna do with it? Like nothing now, right? Time to move on. So, so it probably would have been pretty similar. Just would have been a little, probably just a different experience. So I don't know where I'd be like today, but I definitely wouldn't be in the military anymore. But
Do you have any aspirations to go back, or you're pretty much over it at this point?
No, I definitely couldn't go back even if I wanted to because of the medical retirement. But originally, what got me into psychology, like that wasn't like my initial major or anything like that. It was literally during that time frame of kind of refining like my identity and purpose, because that was all in like what I was doing. Like I was doing what I wanted to do ever since I was 6 years old. Like that was going to be my life. That was going to be my career. And then when that's stripped away from you, especially when you're in infantry, like the only reason you're there, right, is because your physical force and your physical presence and what you can do with your body. If you don't have that, right, you don't have anything. Like you're literally useless. You are not only useless, like you are a burden. So when that's taken and stripped away from you, and then you're just throwing it back out into society, and you're like, shit, what? Who am I? What am I gonna do? During this time frame, like there were other soldiers that I served with, different leaders actually in my battalion that I wasn't close to either of them, but I knew them, right? And they're both like funny dudes with families, guys that you'd look at and be like, that's a strong man. And within 6 months of both of their ETS dates, so getting out of the Army, I think they were probably like 2 months apart. Like both ended up like getting a text message like, did you hear about so and so? Like they committed suicide. And so it put like real faces onto that stat of 22 veterans a day that die. And I was going through almost the exact same process, right? Of like my identity's been stripped away. Like now I'm being thrown back in society where like I don't have like a support group. Even though like within the military, I think you're very much supported, even though it's kind of a hostile environment. You still have that support. People like get you, right? They understand because they're living the same experiences as you. And when you come out, like there's certain things that you can't express in words to people. And I know that I felt okay, right? I saw my situation. I saw what happened to their situations. Then I looked back and I was like, what if so-and-so was in my shoes, right? Where would they be in 6 months? If the exact same thing happened to them that happened to me, where would they be? And like I remember crying when I asked myself that question because I did not know the answer for some of the dudes that like I really cared about. And so that was the first like quantum moment in my life where I was like, you see a problem, like you better be the one to fix it. Like who else better be fixed than someone who not only can bring like a clinical background into like a therapeutic setting, but also you can sit across the table like this, look, and I can look at a veteran in the eyes and be like, I can understand them over somebody who's never served, right? Or never been in the combat arms like position. And that like breaks down barriers. That creates validity and that creates rapport within a clinical setting where you can actually help the client rather than feeling like this person will never get me. They don't understand me. Like he never served, and they just don't open up.
Right.
So that's what made me want to go into psychology and then do a counseling degree. And from there, that vision's kind of really grown. I think I'll always have a niche of veterans. I'll never want to go back into the military, but I don't think I'd ever even want to work within the VA. But I know I always will have that niche and that special like availability to connect with veterans that most people and most counselors like can't.
Right. I can't imagine the amount of like mental toughness it took, because you weren't only in a situation where you feel like you might have lost your identity because you're out of the military. You also have that sense of, you know, them kind of doubting you over the whole back issue like while you're there. So, you know, not only were you, you know, not able to continue that, you also had people, like you said, they never apologized really. It was just kind of like I can't imagine dealing with both of those things at the same time when just one of them is usually enough to drive people crazy.
Yeah.
And I know you talked about looking at your own situation. I think that's so important to be able to almost look at it from like an outside perspective. You know, look at your own situation as if you would look at somebody else's. Because I think that's the only way we can really reflect on ourselves and figure out what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. What you described is empathetic understanding. That's something that's missing throughout society, right? Especially, I think veterans, especially like because we're talking about it, like they don't feel that side of it. Like they can't be understood. And so there's a lack of received empathetic understanding on their part. And so not only do they feel misunderstood by the people that are supposed to be professionals to be able to help them, like even their families, right? And when they're literally taken out of that supported environment, Like not only do they have no support group, their family doesn't get them. Like the professionals don't get them in their point of view. And where does that drive people? That's a scary question to ask.
Right. Because, I mean, you see examples of people that are able to, like, funnel it. And they're able to, like, I know we've talked about him before, David Goggins.
Yeah.
Craziest dude in the world. Mentally the strongest person you could probably think of.
Yeah.
But he was able to channel that energy and channel that, you know, he was able to put, like, what was missing towards something. And, like, he does, like, ultra marathons. And he does, like, he had, like, the world record for pull-ups in a single day. He did, like, 4,000 pull-ups in a day.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. So,
he's insane.
Yeah, being
That's
able
amazing.
to find something to, like, fill that void, you know, whether it be extreme like that or something more like, you know, you're getting back to the gym, you're improve your diet, like, that kind of thing. I think that's so important for people to have balance still. When you go from, like, this schedule where it's like, okay, you're doing PT, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you know, then you can go to the gym, and then you're probably going to bed. Like, you go from that, and then your day becomes, okay, here's 16 hours that you're awake. Like,
Have fun.
yeah, do something.
No, totally. And I think what David Goggins is one of the greatest testaments to is the importance, or the power of the mind, but also the importance of intentional behaviors. So, like, what he did, right, for coping mechanisms was using physical activity to actually alter the state of his mental, like, awareness and his mental health,
Yeah.
right? And that's actually, like, where my passions are and what I want to end up doing. I don't want to end up stopping with just a master's degree. Like, it's not just a master's degree, right? Like,
Right.
that's a pretty big, like, accomplishment. But it's just, like, another checkpoint, right? Because that gives me greater awareness and greater accessibility, and then take that and hopefully get, like, a PhD or something like that within performance psychology. And so you can actually implement as treatments and as preventative measures physical health and the nutrition and the interaction between the mind and the body to naturally alter the state of, like, your neurotransmitter levels, right? So your dopamine, your serotonin, oxytocin, like the production of endorphins throughout your body. Like, these are shown in a natural way to be when you're using just sleep therapy, right? Getting the right amount of sleep, going to bed about the same amount of time, like the same time, like 6 nights out of the week, and waking up at the same time 6 nights a week. Eating right and exercising regularly, those work 5 times better than any antidepressant on the market, right? There's research behind this. But yet, what aren't the doctors prescribing? Those 3 things. And they're giving them these pharmaceuticals that we have no idea of what the longitudinal, like, side effects are of. Like, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and, like, I understand the importance of medicine, right? And it's definitely needed, but it needs to be used, like, more responsibly. And why are we not using these, like, lifestyle measures as preventative measures as well, but using these things that we literally have the power of choice to dictate, like, how we feel each day. Like, our innate mood can be changed by what you eat. 90% of serotonin is built within your gut. So, like, higher levels and healthy levels and higher levels of serotonin are correlated with higher levels of social interaction and life satisfaction, right? Low levels are correlated with high levels of aggression and low levels of life satisfaction. So literally what you eat dictates these levels. So why are we raising kids to eat like crap every day and not giving them just pretty basic ideas of how to eat right?
Well, I think for a lot of people the problem is either the way they're raised, like you say, or they get into a position where they start making their own decisions, and they either don't know how to make the right ones, or they know what the right decision is, but they've never actually done it, so they don't understand the benefits they get from it.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to talk about something than to be about it. Like, it's just so easy to say, oh yeah, you know, I need to eat better. Well, if you start eating better, it's not that hard. And then you can build off that. You know, then you're getting better, you know, your better performance at the gym, you're happier throughout the day. Like, all these things come with it. But because you're not willing, you're too comfortable in your little niche that you have where you're, you know, eating whatever you want and not exercising, whatever, you just don't understand. You don't see outside of that,
Right.
and that's kind of that self-reflection too.
And I think too, along with that, is like the satisfaction of getting something like right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a society thing. Like, you know, it's always nice to go and get fast food because you pay for it and it's there and it's
Yeah.
done in a minute. But like, you know, cooking food takes time, and it's something that you gotta learn and, you know, pick up. I mean, I don't like cooking food, but, you know, I realize that it's probably the best way to go. And it's just the whole thing of, you know, we want it now, we want it, you know, cheap. It'll keep the kids or myself, you know, feeling full for now. So I think that just is another thing that we just want everything, you know, guaranteed right away, which doesn't help at all.
Yeah, and then a lot of people like they go and want to change this, right? New Year's resolutions. How quickly do those end? Because we're talking about goals, implementing foreign behaviors into our lives, and at the start, everyone has all this motivation because it's a new year, right? New year, new me. Let's go for it, dude. But then they try and change 12 things in their life, right? 12 foreign things in their daily life, where you can maybe sustain that for a couple days, maybe a couple weeks before it gets too much. Like everyone has stressors, everyone has jobs, everyone has all these things going on in life. And if you're introducing something that's foreign to that regular routine, right, you have to take time and a conscious effort away from everything else in your life. And a lot of days when you don't have that time to give, what forfeits at that point, right?
The new
The
thing.
foreign behavior.
Yep.
So like for goals, especially for nutrition and stuff, like I would never like come to somebody who wants to change like nutritional, like their diet or anything like that and be like, oh, you should start tracking macros, right? That is so foreign to people. Like what the heck are macros? Right? At first it's like, okay, that might be like the end goal, the end step. That might be step 12. Let's start with like a sustainable and accessible foreign behavior that can then become normalized. So that's, let's not eat out 20 times a month. Let's eat out 5 times a month. So this forces them to eat at home more often. I don't care what they're eating at home. If it's a pizza from the freezer, who cares, right? But they're taking the time. What's being normalized is the behavior of making something at home. Then the next month, when that becomes normalized, it's continuing on with that same behavior, but instead of making the frozen pizzas, like, all right, let's actually make food, right? No form, like no frozen meals, right? And so when that comes normalized, you're like, okay, what kind of food are we making now? And so you're making these little steps, but once that step becomes normalized, you now have accessibility for sustainability when you introduce something else. And like instead of changing 12 things all in the first week and then being done by week 3, you change one thing each week, and by week 12, like you have completely new normalized behavior within your life.
And that was kind of one of the things, like, when I started meal prepping, it was the summer of, I think, after our sophomore year. Yeah, that was when we moved into that apartment. That lovely apartment.
Trump house.
But that was when I started meal prepping, and my meal prep was, like, it wasn't good. I mean, it was baked chicken, which was either too dry or just, like, barely not raw anymore. It had like no flavor. I was just like barbecue sauce all over the place just to make it edible. You know, I had like rice that was like probably too soggy. The vegetables, you know, weren't that great either. And over the course of like a couple years of doing it though, you know, you get better at the things you do.
Mm-hmm.
You make small changes. You know, I started making a couple different things a week, and you know, you're able to. The one thing I like about it is you're able to look at a whole week, and you can say, this is what I want to eat this time of day. This is what I want to eat for dinner. Like, you can just, and I don't like count my macros or anything crazy like that. Like, I think that's a little bit out there, but
especially so crazy. Yeah.
For my goals, at least, it seems it's a little bit out there, but I can look at it and say, all right, if I buy this many pounds of chicken and I buy this many pounds of beef, like, this is how much protein I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
And that's easy for me to do because I can just write it out. I'm a nerd, so I'll use like an Excel sheet and I'll just be like, all right, this is how much I'm getting. Yeah, I can do this for a month or so. Like, no problem. So like recently, I actually was doing intermittent fasting all last semester, and there definitely was some benefits. I felt like,
is that like 10 to 6, 12 to 6?
I was doing 11 to 8.
11 to 8.
Because I was still trying to eat like a decent amount too.
Yeah,
I didn't want to like. I wanted to do it without, because I would like prior to starting it, I was one of those people that would tell you like, intermittent fasting is just calorie reduction. Like, that's what I would tell. Like, that's what my perspective on it was.
Right.
And I wanted to do it where it wasn't calorie reduction. I wanted to see if time restriction actually affects the way your body works. Like,
your metabolism and everything, yeah.
right. But that was one variable I changed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I moved my meal a little bit. And it was interesting because, like, I feel like my gut was happier. But I also weighed the same exact amount when I started the semester and when I ended the semester. So, like, this, you know, after the semester was over, I kind of, like, reflected back and it was like, okay, like, there was some positives in that. But if I want to gain muscle, this isn't the path I should be
work
on.
for you.
Yeah. Or I need to eat more within it, which when you're on time restricted, you're really going to be pushing the limits of what you can eat in a sitting
to get
try
that
to do
goal.
that. Yeah.
I think that's the importance of individuality too, right? Like, just because it didn't work for you doesn't mean it doesn't work for some people. And as much as, excuse me for the listeners that are on ketogenic diets, like, as much as, like, I don't agree with, like, the ketogenic approach, like, really what you're doing, right, you're having a caloric deficit at the end of the day when you do a diet like that. When you look across all these diets, like, the one common factor between all of them is a caloric deficit to lose weight, at least.
Right.
And, like, but what's fine with it, I've seen, like, keto work for so many different people, and it's sustainable for some, but for most probably not. But like, I'm not going to discredit them or discredit their diet. Like, for me, ketogenic, not cool, right? I'm not going to do that. But for them, like, if that's what works for you, more power to you, dude. Like, we should be more focused on individual, like, what works for this person and what works for that person, and having, like, one set template or one set model of, like, this works for everybody, or market things like that, because simply, like, that's not the case.
And the thing too, you see people, like, they'll be, like, eating, like, not that well, and they'll just be like, oh, I'm gonna go keto, and they'll be really strict with keto for a few weeks, and you know, they'll get results from it. It's like, all right, that's great. What would happen if you were to not exclude food groups like keto does, but eat with the same amount of control that you did on keto? You would have seen similar results. You know, if you're eating, like, quality carbohydrates, you know, controlling your portions and stuff, you're gonna get the results. Like, if you were putting the amount of effort in that you were to do keto, just because it's got, like, a nice name and it's popular, that doesn't make it any better than just having that same amount of focus on a regular diet.
Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, actually, like, that's behavior modification too, where, like, even if you go through keto, like, I think that is something that is tangible and you learn and you'll take with you for, like, the time past that.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for people, especially, like, the people that are trying to get into lifting more, is just hit your protein. Get the right amount of protein in.
Yeah.
And then beyond
figure out the rest.
Right.
As you go.
I think that's got to be the first step, though.
Well, I'd ask them, like, what's your intention, right? I think so many people, like, even with lifting, I think my intention of lifting is completely different than yours. It's completely different than a lot of other people. Like, before, Austin asked me, like, what's your focus in working out? I'm like, kind of like powerlifting, kind of like bodybuilding. But at the end of the day, it's neither, really. Like, those are sub goals of, like, how to achieve an overarching or umbrella goal, right? Like, that's what I am interested in. That's what I am focused on. That's what I'm kind of trying to get better at, right? But at the end of the day, like, the umbrella is optimum functioning. So, like, I'm doing this so that I can perform at a higher level, not just within the gym, but in my mental health, in my emotional health, in my social health, in my environmental and occupational health, right? All these different dimensions of health actually, like, work as vines to create that wrap around every individual, that create a stronger individual when they're used together rather than set apart. So if you're if people only focus on physical health and they just don't give a crap about anything else, right? Their overall scheme of health is going to be pretty low, even though they look like they're super healthy. So, like, my objective is, what am I doing in the gym that I'm accessible to and is available to me to be sustainable, and that's slowly getting back into powerlifting. Like, I didn't start deadlifting till I took a 4-year gap of no deadlifts until December. I think December 5th was the first day I deadlifted in over 4 years. I was scared shitless, man, when I did it, because I didn't know how my back was going to respond. But now, like, I noticed that, like, okay, this is obtainable, this is available if I do it smart and I do it slow. And so, like, deadlifting now is a part of, like, my weekly regimen, is a part of my 6-day split. twice a week actually. So it's actually like now being a behavior that is focused on powerlifting, but at the same time like is helping me perform better today, right, outside of the gym and within the gym, but also like it's elevating my availability to be better tomorrow. And that constant like slow like incline of that ceiling above us that we all have of like how we can function today is we can like put behaviors in today, like that's me at the gym, like I'm doing this so that like tomorrow that level is higher, next month that level is higher, next year that level is substantially higher, right? So that's my intention in the gym. It's really not like, oh, I want to compete. I don't know, like I was looking back at your guys' guest list that you've had, I was like, oh crap, I think I'm the only person that wasn't a collegiate athlete or has competed, and I feel super fake. I'm gonna get found out and that I'm a fraud.
Expose them.
No,
Yeah.
there's definitely people that haven't though. I mean,
Rachel
hasn't. I don't think Caitlin competed.
Evan. Oh no,
He did bodybuilding.
He
Yeah.
did, yeah. My bad.
He's
Sorry.
old. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, he doesn't
He's
count.
old.
Yeah, he's an old guy.
But no, I think that.
Biceps McGee.
Yeah, jeez, no kidding. I gave him the award of biggest biceps in the gym. If I was focused on bodybuilding, I'd take that from you, Evan. I'm just saying. But no, I think that it's hard. Like for me, I go into the gym, and I literally think, I don't know what's going on in my head, but I literally think about lifting weights like 8 hours a day, probably. Like I'm always thinking about something. Like, you know, why does this feel that way? Why does, you know, what should this number be by this time span?
Yeah.
And it's
Why
just
didn't you get that last
constantly,
rep?
constantly like in my head, you know, thinking about the weights, and I'm always thinking about, okay, like I have a desire to do powerlifting, but that desire to do powerlifting is not so strong that I just totally am like powerlifter. Like I still have a desire to, and I don't know if this is a product of just like exposure to like social media or to just like general gym, you know, whether it's like on Netflix you got like Ronnie Coleman's documentary, like stuff like that. There's just like this desire like to build muscle, which is, I mean, goes with powerlifting, but obviously just pure muscle building is kind of its own path. So I get stuck in this in between where I'm like, do I want to be a powerlifter or do I want to do like more like bodybuilding? And it's like, and I just have this thing in my mind where it's like, all right, if I hang out in the middle, I'm going to be equally mediocre at both things and not very good at one thing. And it's hard for me to like justify just going all in on one or all in on the other.
Yeah. So what's your end game plan? Like, not, I guess not end game plan, but like, what's the intention behind that? Why do you want to be in the middle?
That's I don't know.
You don't know?
I have a pull from both sides where it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I think every person that steps in the gym wants to be strong and wants to be like aesthetically pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty much part of everyone's end game. Whether it's like physically strong or you want to be more strong where you can go and run 2 miles instead of the 1 mile you did a week before. But I think it's definitely very difficult to have both at the same time.
Yeah. I'm not running, so don't worry.
Well, not running. But I just
We
mean
don't-
like
yeah,
I
we
just
don't
mean
really
like
do that.
strength and aesthetics.
I get you.
I mean, there's a few examples of people that are able to achieve both, but it's not easy. Which I think is part of the allure of it, is
Yeah.
trying to be uncommon amongst the uncommon.
There you go. That's the phrase right there.
That's-
That is the phrase right there. Like, that's literally how I live my life. Like, that is like the mantra every day.
That's a David Goggins quote. That's kind of his goal is to be the uncommon amongst the uncommon.
Yeah.
That'll be the name of this 10th anniversary
There
episode.
you go. But it's also not in the gym, right? So like that's the intention, right? I want to be uncommon amongst the uncommon, and I guess like I will never be the biggest guy in the gym. I'll never be the strongest, lifting the most weights. That's because that's not like my end goal. For a lot of people, that is, and that is completely fine. That's beautiful for themselves, right? And they probably will achieve, like, they would have to pick one or the other because they want to compete in this one thing and be the best of the best. I don't know about you guys, but like, if I'm doing something, I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to lose. I'm not doing it to come in third place. Like,
Right.
I'm going to win, right? I'm going to do what I have to win. So if I was like, if I want to compete on a stage for bodybuilding, like that's not optimum function. It's actually the opposite. Like you're actually getting to a point where like you're really physically fit and healthy, right? And then you destroy that by
you rip
stuff
it down.
you have to go through to cut down to that level where you can be so lean and have such a little body fat on your body where you can be on a stage and actually place and actually do well, right? So for me, like that takes all of the attractiveness of doing comp like that out of it for me. So for me, it's like, okay, that's why I kind of want to be in the middle, is because I don't have ambitions to compete in bodybuilding. I don't really have ambitions to compete in powerlifting. I think if I focus on one or the other, I think I would do well, right? Over the next year or two, just focus on one. Like, I bet you, like, I would play somewhere, right? And just because of my mindset. But I want to be uncommon amongst the common, like, in my career, in my personality, like in my social interactions and in my friendships and stuff like that, and my impact. So like the gym is actually like I see a direct interaction between the two. So if I'm working out so that I feel better intrinsically every day when I wake up, right? So like by working out, there's I'm forgetting the researcher's name right now, but like there is some research done where like if you work out 4 to 5 times a week, I think the research showed, and you do that for 7 to 8 weeks. At that point, right, your mood is intrinsically benefited from when you weren't working out. So the endorphins that you're releasing all that time, you're not just getting that runner's high like right after the workout. Now when you're doing it for that period of time, like from that point on, like you're directly affecting like the mood when you wake up in the morning, right? I want to be a happy dude. I love positivity, right?
Yeah,
like I want to make other people happy. Like if like it's a positive thing, it's a good thing to be like a happy individual. So working out is a direct interaction between that. So it helps me become better. It helps me like hit my goals outside of the gym. Helps me do well in school.
Here's a question for you. Do you think the 40% rule is a thing? Do you think that we only use 40% of our capabilities because of the governor that we have on ourselves from our mind? Yeah, I mean, you got the science kind of behind it, being psychology. I want to know what you think about that, because that was one of the big points that Goggins made about mental toughness, is that there's a lot more in the tank than most people.
Yeah.
Like, more than, like, double, basically, in the tank, what most people are able to
I don't know
give.
about the 40% rule in of itself, but the concept of it, I would have to be on David Goggins' side, because I think that one of the biggest lessons I learned in the military, especially, like, basic training wasn't that hard. There were hard points of it, right? But then when you really get to your unit is where your life really sucks for a while, especially back when I was in. And the guys that were in before me, like, they had it much worse. But, like, not to put, like, the Army on blast or anything like that, but the hazing you go through, right? The shit you go through every single day, right? Physically, emotionally, right? Like, pushes you to beyond what you should be pushed to. And I remember when I would get smoked for hours and hours and hours, right? Like, just be in the front lean rest in like the push-up position, right? In this puddle of sweat, and like your arms, your whole body is just shaking. What was going through my mind? Like, if I put my knee down, I'm gonna be in this position for even longer. If Joe Blow over there puts his knee down, I'm gonna be doing this for longer, right? So not only am I doing this for myself so that he doesn't have to be down there as long as like we have to, right? I'm not gonna put my knee down, and he's not gonna put his down. Like, pain has to end. Like, if I continue this pain in this moment, it will end sooner than if I like take that quick release for like that 2 seconds, then get right back into it, right? So, and when I did that, like, your body goes so much further than what you think you can go through, and that's honestly the mentality I take every time. Like, I hate doing cardio, and I try to do it 3 days a week. I'm on the Stairmaster. I literally listen to like motivational videos of like The Rock or Arnold or David Goggins, and they're just talking about success, like working through pain, like going in, like actually putting in the work, and then the rewards you reap from those that hard work that you went into, like, are for real. Like, I'd rather be like, my mind says like one more. I can do anything for 1 minute, right? And so when you have that repetitive, like, all right, I went to minute 25 on the Stairmaster today. Like, I can do one more. I'm at 26. Might as well make this even. Let's go to 30. Right? You hit 30, and it's like, I can do 5 more minutes. And then the next day when you back on it, it's like, I did 35 minutes yesterday. I can do 36 today, and you hit 36, you're like, I'm gonna do 40, right? That's just cardio. I think I had that mindset throughout the gym entirely, but I would be on David Goggins' side for sure.
I think it's tough too because I'll get in mindsets sometimes where I'll just want to be like I just want to go and train like crazy, and I don't care if I'm at the gym for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and that was like me last semester.
Yeah, same. I remember we were there, really lived there.
Yeah, and it's like, but then I look back and I think, okay, if I'm trying to gain strength, I am just totally tearing myself down to the point that by the next time I'm working out, I'm not recovered. So it's hard to, it's hard to balance that one more mentality with also training intelligently enough that you're able to get what you want out of it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, unless you want to be like a stair-step marathoner and you do one more every day, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're
Not the
gonna
goal.
be-
No, not
We kind of talked about it last week, or the last time was about like resting and the rest days,
Yeah.
and how hard it is to like make yourself like want to just be like, okay, like,
Yeah, and that's my biggest weakness, honestly, is that mindset really translate into an unhealthy environment. Like last semester, like I looked back at like my book where I track my workouts in, and I literally had 4 rest days in the span of August 1st to December 1st, right? Over 4 months, 4 rest days. That is terrible, right? At the end of December, like my body was completely shot. That is not sustainable. That's not smart.
Right.
And so, like, one of the reasons why I'm still I'm on this set like 6-day split. It requires me to have a rest day, and so, it's right now in the first block of the program. Like, I really don't feel the volume because I was so used to all the volume like last semester, and I was used to my body like leaving the gym being like, I could not have put 1 more ounce of effort into that workout, and I feel proud of that. And now I'm leaving like, I can keep going, kind of, right?
Right.
But in the long term things, now I'm like learning the interaction because of that experience. Like, I'm gonna be able to keep going for a longer period of time, and at the end of that, right, I'm setting myself up for greater success and greater strength and greater results because it's sustainable.
Right. And I mean, you're also intentional with your rest days too.
Yeah.
You're not only being intentional with your workout, because I mean, working out is like, I mean, if you factor in everything,
half less
it's less than half.
Less than
If
half.
you factor in eating, sleeping,
dieting, sleeping.
drinking water, and working out's probably like 30%, 35% maybe.
Yeah, right around there.
And it's just so important. And I mean, there's people that'll train super hard, but then they get 4 or 5 hours of sleep every night, and it's like you can't get the results. Those are the big pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And you have to make little changes to help all of them.
Get them all fit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that balance between them, right? And you learn that through experience. That's why, like, last semester's experience was a valuable one, even though during the time it wasn't the healthiest thing for either of us, right? Now look
Right.
at us, right? We're taking that step of like, okay, we see what happened from this experience. How can we change this experience, right? We're not going to expect the difference in our bodies and not changing our behavior. So what am I doing? I'm implementing a new behavior shift. And I love Arnold, man. I love him. But whenever I hear his speech about getting 4 to 6 hours of sleep and still feeling tired, so sleep faster, right? Like, Arnold, no. Like, there's so much science behind that. Like, you're actually making yourself less productive because of that. Like, it's individualized, right? But like, there's data that shows like most people need at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And sleep cycles are kind of like hills where like it goes from like there's 4 different stages of like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's like the healthy balance of sleep. It's not just going from like 1, 2, 3, 4 back to 1 all of a sudden. That's really bad sleep. So you want to have like the healthiest flow of sleep for 7 to 9 hours, and at the end of that sleep session is when I think it's like 132 like different chemicals kind of like fill up in a bucket up in your brain. And at the end of that healthy sleep cycle, that bucket like tips over, and this bucket like restarts your central nervous system, right? It resets your body. That's where you feel like rested from those chemicals being released out your body. But you don't get those chemicals do not get released unless you've had that threshold of healthy sleep. So if you're never getting that threshold of healthy sleep, like you're never getting those chemicals released out your body, and you're really like destroying it. You're setting it up for failure. You're setting it up to like just deconstruct essentially.
Right. Yeah, and I think the one thing I saw an interesting post today from Julian Smith. Actually, he
Heard that name forever.
he said that he is tired of hearing how people will always. He always sees like the social media folk. He called them influencers, which I think is a funny word, but they always talk about how bad they used to be, and they're always like tearing down their former selves. And he said how he's sick of hearing all that, and I really agree with that because I think that like if we like for us to look back at last semester and say, "Oh, I was an idiot. I trained too much." Like that's not the approach to have. The approach to have is to say, "Okay, look, I made mistake X and Y, but I learned from it." And that's the thing. That's how you're gonna learn from it. Yeah, your personal experience.
You're just gonna grow
Right.
as a person, as a lifter, as
Right. So if
your
you're like,
day-to-day well-being.
yeah, so just hating what you've done or like who you were before, that's not going to get you progress. But looking at that and being able to have enough perspective to see the mistakes that person made, that's going to really be what helps you to not do that again.
Yeah. So that's like a deconstructive perspective rather than a reconstructive perspective. So like looking back on mistakes and having a lot of regret and being like, I was so dumb for this. Like you're keeping yourself in that state of pain and trauma and like failure, rather than looking at that failure with a reconstructive phase of like, okay, this happened. Why? You figure out that why, right? You see where you were, you see where you're at, and then you have a solution-focused perspective at that point. And you're like, this is where I want to be. How do I change that? And you implement changes based on like the experiences you had of failure gives you greater awareness of success in the same field. And so like you want to be more towards this. So like I'm going to make direct changes in my day-to-day life to be closer to success than I was to failure 4 months ago. And I think that level of success, like you're going to have your own failures and experiences within there. And it's like this gradual like incline of like greater functioning as an individual.
I agree.
I feel like we talked about a lot today.
So
just a little bit.
What's in the next 5 years for Noah Francis?
5 years, oh man. I'm just worried about getting this homework done tonight. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully I'll have, so this grad program is a 2-year program, and then it takes two years of full-time work to get fully licensed. So I want to get fully licensed to have validity and credibility behind my experience and behind my name, pretty much for a resume builder to get into a specific like PhD program for performance psychology. It's really difficult. There's not a lot of schools that do it, and it's really, really hard to get into. So end goal is to be in 5 years is to be entering into a PhD program or being in the middle of it, or getting a second master's after this one, but focus in like health sciences or nutrition or something like that. Because, right, like we talked about, like my interests and my passions are in the interaction between the mind and the body, right? And then not only taking like research from that, but actually being applicable and being able to like help people instill that into their lives. Like intentional behavior modifications is pretty much everything that I'm going towards. So I want to have like the counselor therapeutic side of it, have like validity behind my name with that, but also would want to have like the scientific credibility and validity behind my name on the health sciences and nutrition side of it too. So I could definitely see doing 2 masters and then maybe PhD, but it's really not about like Joe has this job and I want the job Joe has and he did these, like he went to school for this, right? It's like I see a problem or a different perspective that I think can be tweaked and changed within different approaches of not just mental health, but also physical health too. So how do I enter this field that are kind of like pretty separate at this point? How do I create an integrative like model to be like the bridge between the two?
I think that's kind of like what Rachel, my fiance, she kind of likes the corporate wellness side of like what she's able to do with her major, and that's where it's not as in depth with like the mental part of it, but you're looking at people's physical lives and their habits, and you're modifying them so that they can live more be more healthy, be in less pain. And companies are going to start investing more and more into this area because they see, okay, we spent this many dollars on this guy who, works 60 hours a week and is hunched over at his desk and has back problems and had to get these surgeries and and then they see this person who's healthy with a balanced life, and it's like, all right, we're not spending nearly as much money on this person because they just don't have those health issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if they can prevent it, by having a few people, that's kind of the idea of the corporate wellness.
Yeah, that's actually that's a model within performance psychology, because you're focused on the individual. Within the corporate world, you're focusing on the individual to make them healthier so they have a better performance at their job. Not only better performance today, but long term, right? It's going to be sustainable. That performance is going to get better and better and better when their home life is in good tack, right? When their physical health is in good tack, right? Then their mental health is also going to be in good tack. And so, that's a big part of, what I want to get into is I think those companies, corporate wellness, is definitely focused on individuals, but it's also, at the end of the day, corporate wellness. What's the first word? Is focus on the corporate end of things, right? So it's what can we do? What can we influence so this person's life, right, is set up to be better, but so that we gain from it.
Right. It reminds you of the end goal.
Yeah. So
it's all about them in the end.
It's the same with sports psychology, right? It's all about the team. It's about that pitcher performing the best on that night. Right, and I'm more concerned about. I think that's a big part of it, but I'm more concerned about all right, let's have the same behavior modification so that he pitches at the top of as optimum functioning that he can that night, but also what happens after every game. The next day comes, no matter if you win.
So we can do it every game,
right? So it's long term, he's performing at higher and higher and higher and higher levels rather than just one peak and then down. Right, once you perform well, cool, man, that's great. It's right. Let's focus on, and I don't want to just focus on athletes or anything like that. I think this can be seen across the spectrum of society. But let's not just focus on the one performance this day. I think performing well on each day is a good way to start, but also it's also grand scheme of things. I want to perform well today so that I can perform better tomorrow. So I'm setting myself up for greater success, whether I fail or if I succeed. Right? We need to instill coping mechanisms and just things like that across the span of society.
I think one of the biggest things too with people is that they might be one of the most difficult things for people to do is to feel like they're doing the right things and then something doesn't work out. I think people get instilled in their mind, okay, if I do this and this, things are just going to be perfect. But take for example a pitcher. You could have the best spring training, you could have the best build up to the season. You could be in the best shape of your life, and you go out there on the first day, and you miss on 2 pitches, and you could give up 2 home runs. You could just be totally take that body of work and just feel it be basically obliterated because right. But I think kind of what you're saying is that consistency. Can you steadily improve on it? Where some people, they have that one downturn and they fall into a funk. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest thing is to, you have those downturns, but you got to learn from it. You can't let it pull you down even farther because you're dwelling on it and you're just, woe is me.
Yeah. When I say the word optimum functioning, which is actually the end goal for all my perspectives and intentionality of behavior is optimum functioning, right? that literally can be translated to the state of flow. And state of flow can also be translated to the state of life satisfaction. So state of flow, if you look at it on an X and Y axis, right, it's going to be the balance between the Y axis being challenge and the X axis being skills. And if you're not balanced between the two, right, if you have too much challenge, you're going to have a bunch of anxiety.
Right.
And if you have too much skills and not enough challenge, you're going to live in boredom. But if you gradually increase both together at the same time, right, you're going to continue to be in the state of flow, and eventually the state does get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller the higher you go and eat on the scale of challenge and the state of skill. But if you're doing it with the right focus of I don't want to live and be okay with mediocrity, right, because then that will be boredom, but I don't also want to live in the state of constant fear and anxiety and stress from my job. The amount of cortisol that's going to be pumping through your body is so detrimental to your physical health, to the health of your brain. Cortisol is shown to deteriorate your hippocampus, right, which is where you make memories and store memories and stuff like that. I think one of the craziest things is a lot of people ask me, what's one of the craziest stories from the military? I should have stories. I have some really cool and really crazy experiences, but I can't sit here and just tell you a story. I wouldn't say I'm a bad storyteller simply because I don't have the memory. It's so weird. It's because my body was always in that state of anxiety because the challenge was so high that my body's functions, like the cortisol, was prohibiting me from making memories, right?
Well, that's the last thing that you want to do at that time because you're trying to make everything else function.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to, like, not only do I want to live in the state of flow, I want to help others obtain the same thing. And when you're helping an individual, you're like on the micro level, you're ending up like affecting the macro level as well, right? When you help one individual, it's not just like that person doesn't just sit with it for the rest of their life and don't affect anybody else, right? We're all social human beings. We're all people of impact in some fashion. You all have influence. Every single individual on this earth has influence. Whether you know it or not, someone's watching, someone cares, you have something that someone else doesn't. And that's a big thing, like in the gym world. I'd say, like, I look at myself today, I'm like, I am my biggest critic, right? I don't have this, and this. If only I had this, and this.
Oh yeah, that's
right?
That's the mentality.
But how many people will look at me or would look at you, who I see all my critiques, and they're like, oh my God, if I could only be that one day, right?
Right, like, I'll have a day where bench just feels like it moves like garbage, but like someone who's just getting into the gym might look at me and say, wow, like their technique, you know what I mean? Like, I wish I could have technique like that. They don't look at it and see, oh, like 275 didn't move very well for him today. They're just like, oh, like, wow, look at his technique and like the way he sets up.
That's
like,
what I want to do.
Yeah, we're definitely our own biggest critics.
Yeah. So like, instead of focusing on like what I don't have, I want to focus on like what I do have and how to strengthen those strengths and everything. And when you strengthen your strengths, it gives you better awareness to critique your weaknesses. Like your program all right now, right, is like focus on like your weakest lifts.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you know that because you know your greatest strengths, and those greatest strengths actually helped you identify what the weaknesses were. So now you're going back and you're focusing on your weaknesses, and then at the end of this program, like, not only are you're going to have less weaknesses, like your strengths are going to significantly rise as well.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that this style of programming is effective, and it's similar to what we did last summer, where like last summer we were doing both. So we'd have 2 days a week where we were training like our normal bench, our normal squat, and our normal deadlift.
Oh.
And then the other 2 days we were doing the other one.
Yeah.
And I know like we both felt like those days, they were like the lighter days, and we're like, man, we just don't seem like we're getting as much out of it.
Yep.
But like looking back now, it's like, okay, we were training that because, you know, like we're training close grip bench to strengthen our triceps, which is going to help our regular grip bench on our lockout. Like,
yeah,
it's easy, you know, you can see the way like that carryover you get,
mm-hmm.
when at the time it's like, this just seems like
it was like a decent workout. But it was like, you know.
I know you saw like great progress from that program
mm-hmm.
this summer. Like,
yeah,
just like probably the quickest improvement that you've seen, like as far as going to the gym.
Definitely.
Like that.
Definitely.
I think that's one of the most beautiful things about that's intentional behavior. So like you're creating an interaction between like checkpoint 1 and checkpoint 4, right? You want to have a stronger lockout on your bench. So how are you going to do that? Like you create little levels and little modifications, behavior shifts, like within focusing on your close grip bench, right? Focusing on your triceps. And a lot of people might look at that and like, why are you doing that, man? Like they don't see the interaction, but because you see the importance of that interaction, like now like you're doing this action with an intention of altering like the end goal. Right. And I think that's something that a lot of people can work on. Everyone can always work on it, but a lot of people I think need to be informed on of like, it's not just about like, if you want your bench to go up, you're not just gonna like just go flat bench all the time, right?
Right.
Like obviously if you bench press all the time, like your bench is gonna go up. But if you want like long term and even better results, right, you're gonna focus on these little kind of on the side things too.
Right. Because I mean that's part of it too. Is usually like your weaknesses are like us revolving around a certain point. You know, if you're like weak coming off your chest on the bench, I always feel like when I incline, it's like a longer movement. You know what I mean? Like that's where you're gonna, because you have to go past that point, which you're not gonna get if you're flat benching.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get below that point. So I definitely think it's important. I think you need to. There's two ways to do it, because like this summer, we definitely didn't see the importance in the like some of these movements that we should have.
Mm-hmm.
But the programming was intelligent enough that we didn't have to be as intentional because it was intelligent. So if you can get intelligence and intentional, that's where you're going to be
Yeah.
Then you're
See
gonna
those
be cooking.
even those greater results. Yeah.
I'd always want to like err onto the side of like work smarter, not harder. But I also have this like idea in my head, like, does it have to be one or the other? Like, I want to work freaking hard, dude, but I'm gonna work smart, but also like I'm gonna put the most I can within staying in my like level of working smart.
And that's just I would call that just maturity in the gym. I think the longer you're there, like time wise,
Yeah.
the more years that you spend in the gym, the better you understand the reasoning behind doing things, and the better you understand how to be intentional with those things to get the best results.
Well, it's like anything, you start to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, how to make it work for you. Like you said earlier, the individuality and doing it for yourself.
Yeah. Things become more accessible and available for opportunity when you become more aware. And the only way to become more aware is placing yourself within this environment. So the first time, right, like I step into a gym and I see someone moving a bench press, like all I see is them like a barbell with weight on it going down their chest and going up, right? Like that's it. But like you don't see the technique. You don't see everything that goes behind it, right?
All the mental cues and
where to like
everything that went
focus,
into it
right? Like
beforehand.
with your butt and with your shoulder blades and like what you're trying to do with your wrist while you're while you're pushing the bench up and everything, right? Like you don't see that, and so like you start doing it and you're like, why can I lift only like 135, right? Like
Right.
it's gonna take time, and when you start doing it, you're like, okay, here's a little tip. I'm gonna change this. And that becomes normal again, normalizing behavior. And then you constantly like become more and more and more aware, and then things become more accessible. Things have become available that at first when you first step in the gym, like you're not gonna be available to even see that as a reality, right? So like the first time I ever stepped into a gym to squat was like one of the first days I got to my I was 18 still. One of the first days I got to my unit for PT in the morning, and they just threw on 135 and started warming up, and I never squatted a day in my life. I didn't know anything about form. Like I went down and like I had the worst ankle mobility in the world and like could barely put up 135. I'm like this 200-pound like this kid, right? Like that should not be the case.
Right.
But I didn't have awareness of like how to do it. So first thing it started with was like, okay, maybe let's work on ankle mobility so I can actually do this form right.
Yeah.
And then everything else from there has been like a ladder or a chain of effects from awareness.
And even like for me, I'm not gonna complain about my lower back, but once in a while I'll get like a tightness, and I'll have this like, it's like basically feels like I have like this crazy lower back pump, and it just like holds on.
Yeah.
And so like this is like part of like the 8 hours of me thinking about lifting a day. This is probably like 3 or 4 of them every day. And I went back and I watched a video from the guy that made our first program about bracing. And watching the video, like at the time when I first watched it, because I watched it before we started the program, like it made sense. I implemented it. I was intentional with it, and I didn't have problems. But over time, you know, unless you're constantly like refreshing things, you're not going to maintain it. So like my bracing had like kind of peaked, and then it's kind of tapered off. And watching the video, I was like, oh, it's no wonder my lower back's hurting. Like I'm forgetting to do this, this, and this. So like we kind of have to constantly check ourselves. And like even the guy that made the video, Ben Pollock, even he says in the video, he's like, this is one of the toughest things to do correctly. He's like, this will take probably a couple years to master. And that just like clicked with me. I was like, obviously me watching that and doing it for like 3 months, that's not mastering it. Like I need
like
to
no
be
wonder.
right.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna do this right, I need to be more intentional with it and be more intelligent with it, and then you'll avoid those problems. So that was my refresher today. I watched that video twice.
Gotta take the notes out.
Yeah.
Write it
No,
all down.
yeah.
No, I
Step
definitely gotta
one.
write stuff down.
Yeah.
And once in a while too, I'll watch videos. He has videos on like bench, squat, and deadlift, and I'll watch them and just get his cues, and I'll just write them down.
Yeah,
And then-
foundation is everything. Like within the gym, within your career, right? Like you're never in a point where you're too good to like reopen that intro textbook kind of thing, right? Like you
Right.
need refreshers on those things, because now like when you're reading it from this different point of view. So when you're lifting, right, you're looking back at these videos and your perspective is on a completely different thing than it was when you first watched it. So like that video actually changes. What you get from that video completely changes.
Right.
Because you're not just focused on the overall video in of itself, but like obtaining all this information and be like, okay, cool, I'm gonna do this. Like now you're like, okay, I did this stuff, but like I missed this.
Right, and that's like the thing too. We do something, we absorb it, we peak. We hit like a peak level of like implementing it basically, and then we come back down a little bit. And my bracing was way better than it was even like before I originally started working on it. I was at a point where I was better than that still, but I still was not optimal. So we kind of, it's an upward progression, but it's not without digression, and then you need to refocus, and that's how you got to make progress. You can't just expect it to be linear.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I love OU to work out in, right? Like, it's a great place, but I really try and enthrone myself with the individuals that I see there that create that awareness for me, right? I see them as way far beyond like my level of lifting, my level of education and everything like that, because I never want to be the smartest person in a room, right? I also don't want to be the dumbest, but I also don't want to be the smartest, right? Because you are a product of what you surround yourself by, who you surround yourself by, the environment. So why would I not put myself in this environment, in an environment where I feel challenged and I'm I need to get better, and that's how I do it, because I see it in front of me, it's real. So with you at the rec, I see your bench press and I'm looking at your form, dang, my form needs to be worked on, right? And so bombard you with questions and work on it and find the individual, what works best for me, but also improving because of the people that I'm surrounding myself by.
And I'm I see people like a Nick Baker.
Yeah.
Who's benching 360 pounds.
Freaking Nick
I'm
Baker.
I got last night.
30 pounds on him, and he's benching 30 or 40 pounds more than me. And it's just I look at someone like that, and I think, I think about what they're doing, and I think about how I can try to apply that to mine, and that kind of keeps me focused. Just always having a perspective. I don't want to say looking down on yourself, but I almost want to say looking up towards others. You're not looking down on other people, right, thinking, oh well, I can't get anything from them because I think I'm smarter than them. You might be actually smarter than someone, but I'm sure they have areas where you can look to them and gain improvement.
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, well.
You're just going to write them off.
Yeah.
Right. There's always something you can pick up from somebody.
You can't just be oh, well, I lift more weight than this person, so I know more about that than they do.
Yeah, at that point, you're what they call an asshole.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know. That guy that was benching 465 yesterday, I wasn't going to say anything to him. He was...
by 3.
Yeah, that's what he's on me.
He was a big boy.
Yeah, we were gawking at him like little schoolgirls.
Honestly, though, we were trying to get on the bar, but
I was doing leg press. I was looking in the window at the reflection. I'm oh my gosh, this guy's got the same amount of weight on that I do right now, and I'm doing leg press and he's benching. It's this is just nuts. But I mean, I'm sure even him, he has people like a coach or something that tells him, hey, this is how you should program your lifts. No matter who you are, there's always someone that's had more experience, or that's had different experiences. Because I mean, having the most experience is one thing, but you could have somebody like yourself with your back issue where it's a totally different experience. So you might be able to help somebody else who's having issues because you've been through, the 2 months on, 4 months off, that kind of thing where you understand, the limitations you had to have in place and what kind of things triggered it.
Yeah, and I think a really pivotal thing of realization that I have come to in life is understanding that I don't understand anybody to the fullest degree, right? Someone can tell me their story and tell me something that happened to them, and I can be I understand. I know what you're going through. You could have gone on something that looked identical to them, right? But at the same time, you do not understand what they're feeling, to what they're actually feeling. You can do it to a degree, but their experience is completely different, even if it looks identical to yours, right? And so when you take that approach of I'm one individual, and who the heck am I to think that I have got it all down and all right, whether it's in the gym or whether it's in life, or whether it's in relationships, whatever you want to talk about it within it is I'm one person and I bring a certain strength and certain knowledgeable facts to the table with, right? And who am I to think that that's it? That's the only form of truth or the only form of beauty in life. It's really not. You want to surround yourself by these people that also have this different takes, different approaches, and different experiences that add to your overall awareness like in the gym, right? Your overall functioning in the gym is when you add other people's experiences and you gain to the best of your knowledge, but not totally, right, like understand exactly everything that's happened to them or why they do certain things.
Right, and I mean, I think a good example of it is look at all the best bodybuilders, power lifters, strongmen, Olympic lifters. They all have a coach.
Yeah.
They're the best in the world, and they have a coach. So, I mean, that just kind of goes to show that there's never not room for someone to help you.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that possibility. You could be the strongest man in the world, but your coach still can challenge you and still can give you ways to improve yourself that you might not have seen. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's
Dude.
been real.
Time flew by.
Oh yeah. Longest podcast?
That's right. We're
It
going
is,
we're
yeah.
going long form style. We're going to get on Joe Rogan's level here real soon.
Yeah. We're close. I think Mike Tyson's was pretty short, so we might be close to that one.
Psh, Mike Tyson.
What a clown.
That guy's stories were absolutely crazy.
Yeah, there's less drugs here than there were on that podcast. I can give the listeners that
Yes.
information.
And less drugs in the stories too.
Yes. Yeah.
Little bit of drugs.
A little
Yeah.
bit of drugs, but not
Just a
quite
little
the
bit.
same level.
Yeah.
Well, Noah, thank you for coming.
No, thank you for having me. This was awesome, guys. You guys have a really awesome platform that I think you're reaching a lot of people that want this content. So keep it coming.
Thank you. That's what we're hoping to do.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Do you have any last advice, words, or sentence, or something
Yeah.
that you want to say?
Last sentence. Everyone is listening. Everyone in this room. Strive to be uncommon amongst the uncommon.
There it is.
I think there's a trademark on that, but that's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll take it.
Don't quote me.
All right. Thank you.